What's up, YouTube? Jeff Bryans here, back with a whole bunch of mountain bike content this summer, kicking things off with a look at the Aventon Current EXP. This e-bike, released from the lesser-known California brand Aventon, was launched in March of this year, and it's honestly been covered by a high number of credible gear reviewers. So instead of a normal Jeff Bryans-style deep dive review where I really hold your hand through every aspect of this bike, I decided to distill my most interesting findings into an ordered list of sorts. This should let you all jump around to what you find most interesting, while I pack the most information into the shortest amount of time. As a side note, I have linked my most favorite deep dive reviews in the comments if you're unfamiliar with the bike and just want a broader look at the Current EXP. Okay, enough housekeeping. Let's get into this one. Let's go ahead and kick this off by just going right at the elephant in the room. With DJI or Avinox kicking off what I'm going to call the Power Wars with the release of their M2S drive system, is this bike still relevant? As a reminder, Aventon is powering this bike by a Gaboa drive unit dubbed the Aventon Ultro X. They partnered with them, worked closely to build the drive unit. It's putting out about 850 watts of power, 100 newton meters of torque with 500% support versus the M2S at 1500 watts, 150 newton meters of torque and 800% support. On paper, this bike puts out roughly 56% the power, 80% the torque, and requires the rider to put more power into the pedals to get those numbers back out. But here's the thing, it almost didn't matter. When the trail got steep, got technical, got gnarly, kind of the stuff I'm looking to try to ride an e-bike up, I most often was in the lower output trail mode, and at times was in auto mode. It's also very good. But there were very few times I was in the highest output turbo or boost mode. The thing about an e-mountain bike is we're really limited by how much power we can put to the ground. The contact patch, it's relatively small, and rider technique is fairly limited because we have to be pedaling to get the power out of the motor. It's not like a dirt bike, something that those of you who sub to my channel know I love riding, where you can be really dynamic on the bike, shifting your weight around a lot while trying to go up really tricky stuff. To add, even the dirt bike guys learned a long time ago that power isn't what you're most after when riding trickier and trickier terrain. Most hard enduro guys are on mellower two-stroke 300s as opposed to like a fire-breathing, track-tuned 450. But Jeff, what about going faster on mellower trails? Surely that's where the power matters. Yes, but there too, there's limits. If you want to put down the fastest possible time on your local XC loop, you're going to be faster on the Avinox product than the Aventon product. I just got to be honest there. But depending on how technical it really is and how willing you are to break the rules, after all, the federal government in the US does define an e-bike as being equal to or less than 750 watts of sustained power. The Aventon is going to be closer to the Avinox than maybe one would think. On my test climb, which is about 1,500 vertical feet, I was roughly 30 seconds faster on the Avinox versus the Aventon. As an aside, I was getting up it in about 11 minutes, which is absolutely absurd. It takes me, 2.5, 3 times that without the motor going as hard as I can. Big takeaway here. Despite what the numbers may suggest, the Avinox isn't that much powerful than the Aventon. It's on trail anyway. The more technical it is, the harder it is, the less these Power Wars numbers, whatever spec sheet, really matter. Before we move on, I do want to put a disclaimer here. We're early in all this, and I could for sure see myself changing my mind and deciding that more power is in fact always better, regardless of terrain choice. The big thing here is I could see a world where power delivery algorithms, traction control, even a hand throttle, which I know the purists out there would absolutely lose it on, could completely change what I'm saying here. But for now, I'm just trying to say that 750 watts of power, 120 newton meters, 110 newton meters of torque. That's a really fun riding package for real mountain biking. Okay, let's talk top speed. The Current EXP is a bike that allows the user to unlock Class 3 top speed. For those unfamiliar, this simply means the governor is raised from 20 miles an hour to 28 miles an hour and may change where you're legally allowed to ride the bike. Be very careful here. In Victor, Idaho, where I live, most of the e-bike trails, they're also moto trails, so it's a moot point. Go as fast as you want, responsibly, of course. But surprisingly, this raise of governor speed or top speed it didn't really change the riding experience. I was seldom going uphill over 15 or 16 miles an hour, nowhere near the 20-mile-an-hour cutoff to class 3. Where it was really a factor was on the road going from one trail to the next, commuting, going to the bar, going to the coffee shop, a really mellow fire road or flatter single track, which truthfully I don't find myself on all that much. Two things to note here. Yes, again, on the higher power Avinox, you can more readily test that 20-mile-an-hour limit going uphill. So it does become a factor as power just straight up goes up. Take that for what it's worth. Second, with respect to the this bike in class 3 mode going downhill, there were a handful of times I'd hit a corner maybe, I didn't hit it quite right, I came out going a little slower than I wanted to, and I could grab a pedal and get that assist and get over a gap or something like that that otherwise would have had me scrambling or just not hitting the gap. Big picture, I was surprised how on the trail the governor didn't really come into play. It was really the trail that dictated how fast I could go. And yes, to be ultra clear, if you do have more power, you're going to be able to test that top speed more frequently. Again, take it for what it's worth. Moving on, let's talk range. This is honestly the dark side of all that power coming out of the motor. More output means significantly faster drain. I measure range in vertical feet. I don't really care how far I can go. And in the case of the Aventon, I was consistently able to get around 8,000 vertical feet in eco mode before the battery was dead. In higher output modes, the battery would get nuked substantially faster. I was able to drain the entire thing in a very fast sub 4,000 vert ride in turbo and boost mode, which was about an hour of riding. Actually, it was less than that, which is absurd. It's so crazy how far and fast you can get up and down stuff. As an aside, this is in direct parity to what you're going to get out of similar sized batteries from Avinox, Bosch, Bros, etc. We're running into what physics will allow here, and they're all very efficient motors. They're almost in parity across the line there, so this should hardly be a surprise. Let's talk about the motor from a rider experience standpoint now. How loud was it? How did it feel? Engaging power, that sort of thing. It's very good. It's right there with the best of them. With one aside, which I'll get to in a minute when I talk about things I didn't love. And it's also highly tunable via the Aventon app. More on that in just 1 minute. Okay, next up, let's talk about a phenomena I'm going to dub the e-bike performance paradox. Yes, I made that up. But what I'm getting at here is a number of gear reviewers, myself included, have noticed that e-bikes make component selection less important than analog bikes. There are two reasons for this. First, a human is a relatively low output motor, so maximizing efficiency and counting grams, how well your bearings roll, all of that, it matters, and it can really improve on-trail performance. After all, most of us struggle to put out even 1/3 horsepower for an extended amount of time on a climb, let alone 8 horsepower or more for extended amounts of time like a modern e-bike. So light wheels, cranks, that sort of thing, it just doesn't matter as much. Second, the weight of the bike centralized in the down tube and the bottom bracket actually makes bikes ride better in a number of ways. Not only do you get added grip in ways most analog bikes could never produce, almost feeling like a dirt bike, but mediocre suspension works in many ways better than top-end stuff found on lighter non-motor assist mountain bikes. This isn't to say there isn't a difference between top-end components and budget tier, but it's to say that the delta, it's significantly flatter and hard to discern. It's even harder to discern when I put a clock on things. Put differently, I'm not sure a bike that is double this price is going to go really any faster down or up my favorite hard enduro e-bike loop. Obviously, if you're going to get more power to the bike, things change. But I think this is saying something. I think the components just don't matter as much. Speaking of suspension, the bike relies on a tried and true FSR platform with very neutral geometry, all good things. The bike is also a 140/150 offering, and it feels as such. In a way, this is one of those bikes I feel on top of, not in. But again, at these travel numbers, this should not be a surprise. Don't buy this bike thinking you're going to have some big travel brawler. You're going to be disappointed. That said, I was very surprised how hard I could push it in legitimate DH bike terrain once I got the suspension tuned to my liking, which meant I skewed toward the softer side of things, which is hardly the norm for me. Running 33-35% sag out back and riding my Lyric a hair under 90 PSI, which is about 10 PSI lower than I often find myself going with on that fork. When set up like this, the bike used more of its stroke both front and rear, but gave me more traction, was more composed, and more fun. Final point here. The suspension on this bike does have a more muted feeling to it. And honestly, I'd like to see iterations in the future go to a 36 or a 38 from Fox. The Grip 1 is awesome. I don't know what they're calling it now. It's the best bang for the buck. But again, the Lyric wasn't a bad riding experience. Final aside here on bike feel, some have found this frame to be flexy, and I totally agree. It's not the stiffest thing out there, but I don't think frame flex is nearly as much of a negative, if any negative at all, compared to what other gear reviewers might say. The aluminum rear end made into the front carbon triangle. It has, in my opinion, kind of the right amount of flex to help maximize traction and reduce rider fatigue. Just my opinion there. Moving on, let's talk software. It's just flat good on this bike. From the bike's top tube touchscreen display that integrates with Trailforks and Strava, to the app itself that has some pretty nifty anti-theft features via the bike's 4G connectivity. This is not software that feels like an afterthought. It is top tier stuff on par with anything you're going to find on the market, if not better. To me, this is an indication of how serious Aventon is about being a legitimate contender in the e-bike space, from mobility to mountain bike. Speaking of being a contender, their sponsorship of Angel Suarez at the World Cup downhill level, it ought to speak volumes to where things are going. On that note, I mean, let's talk about Aventon for a minute. I think this is one of the only companies that's going to be able to directly compete with DJI, Avinox, Amflow. They're the same company. If you haven't, check out my deep dive DJI podcast on Vital MTB I did with Charlie Sponsel. One thing is clear. The new China is not the China many of us remember as kids. The motor provider to Aventon, Gabao, it may not be quite as innovative as DJI's, team, that sort of thing, but it is supposedly staffed with ex-DJI employees, and they've already unveiled a gearbox-driven drive unit that will rival the Avinox one. To add, unlike many legacy players, Aventon doesn't seem to have the same financial struggles they're having. Though I don't have any direct insights into Aventon's balance sheet or financial health, that sort of thing, they most certainly seem on the offensive. This bike's a reflection of this, and it's a very good crack at a full suspension e-bike for their first go. And it just seems like they have plenty of resources and they're doing much better than many players in the space. This is a good thing, big picture. Moving on that kind of value front, let's talk about how good of a value this bike is. It goes without saying, but this bike is near the Pareto frontier when it comes to maximizing price performance and being able to actually buy it. Yes, there are some Amflow bikes that are incredibly well priced too, but most of those bikes are vaporware when it comes to getting them anytime soon. Don't mishear me. I'm not saying those bikes don't deserve a real look, but summer is short and Aventon has bikes in stock. Being able to find something with an electronic transmission drivetrain that drives off the main battery, good brakes, all of this at, $5,999. It's really hard to do that. And don't sleep on the $3,999 model as well if you're really on a budget. For a more casual rider, it's really, really worth the look. And I just want to point out kind of the competition. DaVinci just came out with a bike at, $6,800. Specialized has a similar bike at the same price point. So I would say the net savings here is about $800. And it's notable. That's a notable amount of money to be saving, especially if you're looking for an efficient, versatile e-bike. All right, moving on. I got to talk about a handful of things that I didn't love about the bike. First and foremost, the motor rattles more than I'd like when ascending. If there's one thing I would encourage Aventon to fix, it's this. I want the quietest ride possible. And this was a bit distracting. It's maybe on par with older Shimano offerings. It's definitely not as good as the latest Avinox or Bosch offerings. Second, the dropper post, it's too short in an extra large. I would like to see them spec a 200 millimeter, which is what I ended up going to. The tires, they need an immediate upgrade to something with burlier casing. This is a hill I'm going to die on. Every e-bike should just come with downhill tires at this point. To add, I'd like to see future generations of this bike go up in travel 10 millimeters to be a 160, 150 millimeter bike. Even if the rumored enduro bike is coming, I still think it's a more versatile, better package at that travel amount. And then finally, I'd just be lying if I didn't note that this isn't quite as polished or as refined as higher end offerings out there. The irony to that statement is, even if this bike isn't quite as refined as others on the market, my on-trail experience isn't really affected because of the e-bike's performance paradox I already covered. I just want to be clear. I don't want you to go buy this thinking you're ending up with a $12,000 forbidden bump-eating monster. You're getting a really good bike that is balanced in almost any trail riding situations and is no slouch when things get gnarly. But there are better bikes at higher price points. Okay, moving on. One area I'd love to see Aventon spend a little time, or really any company, but I think Aventon's the right one. It's a really good mountain bike, but it's also a great utility bike or SUV bike. So I'd like them to pay closer attention to how people are actually using their bikes and build the world's best accessories to give these bikes more versatility. I'm talking things that quickly, with like a quick release, go on and off the bike to, maybe you're going to do a trail build session and you need to bring tools. Cool, there should be a way to do that. Maybe you're going to the farmer's market and you want to throw a rack on really quickly that integrates with this bike in a cool way. You should be able to throw that on quickly. Lights, like the whole deal, bike packing stuff. I think there's a huge market because you can always take a mountain bike and make it a utility bike, especially if it's a class 3 bike, because you can go 28 miles an hour. But you can't really take a mobility bike and go mountain biking with it, or at least I'd heavily discourage you from doing such a thing. Okay, on to the conclusion. So who would I recommend the Aventon Current EXP to? If you're a rider looking to stretch your dollar as far as it can go, wants to buy something that is actually in stock, and looking for a highly versatile machine, maybe one that skews toward efficiency and climbing prowess over bump eating ability, this one ought to be near the top of your list, if not at the top of the list. I'm a self-proclaimed bike nerd with lots of bikes in the garage, and I always get excited when I get to throw a leg over the Current EXP, especially if we're aiming to tackle a harder, steeper, almost, let's call it hard e-bike enduro climb. Yes, it's not the most refined or polished ride out there, and if you're trying to win your local Strava DH on a bike, you're probably going to want to look elsewhere. But if your goal is to maximize the amount of fun $5,999 can legally buy you on a bike that's actually in stock, this is about as good as it gets. As always, I really appreciate everybody taking the time to watch my content. If you like it, share with a friend, hit that subscribe button, leave me a comment, and I hope you all are having a great summer. Cheers.